The revival of Confucianism and the Chinese dream under Xi Jinping acts as a tool to justify Xi's rise to power and his goal of political conformity under his leadership. I argue that Confucianism has been institutionalized so that it has become an extension of CCP doctrine, and that Xi uses Confucius to position himself as a cultural reviver and justify his historic accumulation of power. I then argue that the Chinese dream is used to enforce political conformity, which has especially dangerous consequences for ethnic minorities such as the Uyghurs. Confucianism is a system of values and way of life that encapsulates social norms, ethics, politics, and interpersonal relationships. It has fundamentally shaped Chinese society since ancient times, and despite its denunciation during the Cultural Revolution under Mao, it remains a hallmark of Chinese traditional culture. Xi Jinping's efforts to revive Confucianism are part of a larger trend of the CCP adopting nationalism to foster political unity. As a consequence of the reform and opening up era, the CCP was faced with the three beliefs crisis: crisis of faith in socialism, crisis of belief in Marxism, and crisis of trust in the party. This was due to the rapid and profound shifts in the party's practices, such as introducing market-style economy and normalizing ties with the US, which would have been unthinkable under Mao, leading the people to question the CCP's legitimacy. The three belief crises would be further exacerbated by the collapse of the Soviet Union. At this time, the party was struggling to defend its legitimacy as a communist authoritarian party, as evidenced by the Tiananmen Square protesters who called for democracy and reform. The Tiananmen Square massacres left China heavily criticized by the global community and more isolated as a result. This isolation and hostility felt by China gave rise to the new surge of nationalism and anti-Western sentiment, and the CCP began to promote nationalism more heavily, for example by enforcing patriotic education in schools. Nationalism became a means of uniting public support under the party. Xi Jinping has continued this trend by attempting to revive the legacy of Confucius and instill greater cultural pride in China. Since the beginning of his presidency, Xi has made efforts to promote Confucianism, such as having party members attend lectures on Confucius and establishing the National Center for Chinese Classics. Xi himself attended the celebration for the 2565th anniversary of Confucius' birth in 2014, making him the first Chinese president to attend a celebration of the classic thinker's birth. In modernizing Confucianism in China, a repackaging of institutionalization to consolidate party leadership by Xufeng Wu argues that the process of modernization really means institutionalizing. Institutionalizing Confucius means that Confucius' teachings will be used as a tool to reinforce and legitimize the status quo, rather than as a means of intellectual investigation or debate. Xi Jinping's use of Confucian references supports Wu's argument. In a speech given at the 2565th anniversary of Confucius' birth, Xi stated that Confucianism has contributed to the formulation and preservation of the political situation of unity and unification of China as a country, and to the generation and enrichment of the Chinese national spirit, and to the inspiration of Chinese men and women to safeguard national independence and resist foreign aggression. Xi uses Confucius' name to support the CCP's existing narrative of Chinese nationalism in opposition to foreign forces. In a speech honoring the 40th anniversary of reforms and opening up, Xi drew on another idea of Confucius's, which is great harmony under heaven. He says, since ancient times, the Chinese nation has firmly believed in, but also carried out in interactions and cultural exchanges with other nationalities, the broad-minded ideals of great harmony under heaven and the bringing countries together. Harmony is an essential value in Confucian teachings and can be manifested as on a personal, familial, societal, and even universal level. Harmony in Confucianism is the result of moral uprightness, as one can only achieve harmony with oneself and others by upholding high moral standards. Confucianism promotes the idea of cultivating oneself into a morally upright person in order to establish ties of harmony with others, starting with the family, which is the building block of society. On a societal level, a morally upright leader will be capable of establishing harmony throughout the whole nation. In Xi Jinping and Confucianism, Legitimacy and National Moral Identity, McKenna Zogelman analyzes Xi's use of great harmony under heaven in his speech and points out how the concept invokes the idea of the mandate of heaven. The mandate of heaven is the idea that a ruler who is virtuous and cares for the people justly receives a blessing known as the mandate of heaven, which legitimizes their leadership. If they fail to uphold virtuousness, the mandate is lost. By insisting that China both believes in and practices the ideal of great harmony under heaven and invoking Confucian ideals of mandate of heaven, Xi Jinping positions himself as someone who will not only revive Confucian ideals of harmony, but also uphold them. Xi Jinping is China's most powerful leader since Mao Zedong. Since the beginning of his leadership in 2012, Xi has managed to concentrate more and more power and influence into his hands, starting with extensive anti-corruption campaigns. These campaigns root out any kind of political challenge or opposing thought and allow Xi to elevate those who share his thinking and are most loyal to him. In 2018, under his leadership, the term limit for the president's office were removed, allowing Xi to rule potentially for life. He also had his political ideology, Xi Jinping thought, enshrined into the constitution, making his ideology the guiding force of the party and his authority thereby virtually unchallengeable. Such a leader has not been seen since the Mao era, which comes with a level of skepticism. For Xi, it is essential to justify why he has to be the one to amass such a level of power which has not been seen in decades. He has found a way to do this through his advocacy for the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, or the Chinese dream. The great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, or Chinese dream, is the narrative that China must reclaim its status as a glorious civilization, a status that was lost during the 100 years of humiliation at the hands of Western and Japanese imperialists. While the idea did not emerge under Xi's presidency, it has become a hallmark of the Xi era, as Xi promises to bring China to glory. Key to the realization of the Chinese dream, according to Xi, is the revival of traditional Chinese culture. In his 2565th anniversary of Confucius speech, he states, "We can only open up the future when we keep history in mind. Fine traditional culture is the fountainhead of a country or nation's inheritance and development." Through his efforts to revive this fine traditional culture, which is so integral to China's development, Xi, by extension, positions himself as integral to the realization of the Chinese dream. He sets himself apart from previous leaders as a cultural reviver whose rise is necessary to China reclaiming its ancient status as a glorious civilization. By positioning himself and his unprecedented rise to power as integral to the realization of the Chinese dream, Xi justifies conformity to his political ideology as essential to the Chinese dream. China's rejuvenation, according to Xi Jinping, is only possible when China is united under one party, one ideology, and one leader. Xi has stated, "It is necessary to adhere to the leadership of the party over all work. Among the party, the government, the military, the people, the academia, and all circles, the party leads all." Thanks to his political thought being written into the constitution, the party is now synonymous with Xi Jinping himself. The Chinese dream has been used to justify measures taken by the CCP to enforce nationwide conformity with Xi Jinping thought, including the development of the Shuixi Chengguo app. The app was launched by the CCP in 2019 with the aim of helping citizens study Xi Jinping thought. The app includes readings, videos, and quizzes to teach Xi's ideology, as well as a point system to encourage daily use. The message that to study Xi is to make the country strong is upheld by the rhetoric of the Chinese dream, which upholds Xi's leadership as the nation's path to rejuvenation. The app demonstrates how political conformity has extended beyond the party to the extent that each individual citizen is expected to not only support Xi's thoughts, but to also adopt it as their own. With the app, each person is expected to sacrifice their free time and energy to studying Xi Jinping thought in order to make the country strong. It is this daily act of sacrifice that makes the app so dangerous. As people, tired from work or school, take time out of their day, perhaps on their commute or on their lunch breaks, to study Xi, they are normalizing to themselves the practice of personal sacrifice for the party. Beyond time and energy, they are sacrificing their individual political thought by engaging with an app that feeds an endless stream of G thought and leaves no room for expressing their personal interpretation or views of it. Political conformity under Xi Jinping's Chinese dream is dangerous for China's ethnic minorities, in particular the Uyghurs. Firstly, this is because the Chinese dream promotes Han nationalism, which undermines and threatens Uyghur cultural identity. Secondly, because Xi Jinping has positioned himself as the defender of Chinese traditional culture, which really means Han culture. Refusing to conform to Han culture is seen as a refusal to conform to Xi Jinping's authority and therefore is seen as a threat. The Great Rejuvenation of the Chinese nation promotes China as a singular nation with a singular cultural legacy. The narrative of the Great Rejuvenation is that China was once a glorious civilization with a glorious culture and then lost that status of glorious civilization during the 100 Years of Humiliation. The CCP positions itself as the means by which China can reclaim its glory, and Xi has taken this a step further by insisting that returning to traditional Han culture is the only way China can realize its rejuvenation, as it is, in his words, the fountainhead of the country's or nation's inheritance and development. This narrative places Han culture as the superior and only Chinese culture, meaning that Uyghur culture, which remains distinct from Han, is deemed inferior. Xi Jinping, through his unprecedented rise to power, has made himself inextricable from the CCP and the Chinese dream. Failure to conform with either CCP ideology or the Han-centric Chinese dream means failure to conform with Xi Jinping's leadership. He views conformity as integral to the success of China, resulting in political, cultural, or ideological differences being construed as threats to national well-being. Therefore, taking measures to forcibly conform, suppress, or even erase such differences becomes justified. The genocide of the Uyghur people of Xinjiang demonstrates the dangers of unchecked political power and the nationalist sentiment. The CCP has forcibly detained thousands of Uyghurs in re-education camps with the intention of erasing the Uyghurs' national and Muslim identity, which the CCP sees as deviant or a threat to political and cultural authority. In these camps, detainees are forced to study CCP ideology and abandon religious and cultural practices. Mass rape and sterilization are among the many abuses committed against Uyghur detainees, which human rights groups such as Amnesty have declared crimes against humanity. Forced labor is another mark of these internment camps. The process of re-education through forced labor is reminiscent of the Cultural Revolution. Xi Jinping's revival of Confucianism and the promotion of the Chinese dream is underpinned by narratives of conformity to Xi's ideology and Han nationalism, which have been used to justify the genocide of the Uyghur people.